November 1943. The Solomon Islands. A Japanese naval officer raised his binoculars to scan the moonless horizon, confident that American ships lay blind somewhere in the ink-black sea ahead. His fleet had spent decades mastering night combat, training their eyes through strict light discipline, consuming vitamin-rich diets, waiting 30 minutes in darkness before battle to maximize natural night vision. The Americans, he knew, fumbled through darkness like children. His commanders had laughed when intelligence reports mentioned experimental infrared equipment being tested by U.S. forces, more American gadgetry that would fail when blood filled the water. He lowered his binoculars and smiled. The darkness belonged to Japan. What he didn't know was that at that exact moment, American gunners were watching him through a revolutionary device that turned night into day, tracking every movement of his ship with crystal clarity while he saw nothing but void. The hunters had become the hunted, and they had no idea. The Imperial Japanese Navy entered World War II with a night fighting doctrine unmatched by any nation on Earth. For 2 decades, they had transformed darkness from obstacle into weapon. Officers underwent brutal training regimens, months spent in dimly lit rooms, diets heavy in carrots and fish rich in vitamin A, exercises designed to push human night vision to its biological limits. According to interrogations conducted by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey in 1946, Japanese naval commanders considered their night fighting superiority a force multiplier as valuable as an extra carrier group. They had earned that confidence through blood. At the Battle of Savo Island in August 1942, Japanese cruisers annihilated an Allied force, sinking 4 heavy cruisers in less than an hour of nighttime chaos. The Japanese ships appeared like phantoms, fired with devastating accuracy, and vanished before American forces could effectively return fire. Commander Frederick Reef Cole, who survived the battle aboard USS Vincennes, later described the engagement as fighting a ghost. The Japanese hadn't just won, they had demonstrated complete mastery of night combat while American forces flailed in confusion. Naval History and Heritage Command archives reveal the extent of Allied night fighting deficiencies in 1942 and early 1943. American lookouts strained to see enemy vessels that Japanese observers had spotted minutes earlier. Radar helped, but early systems couldn't provide the precise targeting data needed for accurate gunnery. Fire control directors needed visual confirmation, and American eyes simply couldn't compete with Japanese training and doctrine. Admiral William Halsey reportedly told staff officers that fighting the Japanese at night was bringing a knife to a gunfight, except they have the gun. Japanese commanders didn't just believe in their night fighting superiority, they structured entire operational plans around it. Imperial Japanese Navy interrogation transcripts from the MacArthur Memorial Archives show that Admiral Sentaro Omori explicitly planned the Battle of Empress Augusta Bay as a night action, confident that darkness would neutralize American numerical advantages. Captain Tamichi Hara, one of Japan's most successful destroyer commanders, wrote that American overdependence on technology made them helpless children when their radar failed or conditions demanded visual fighting. This contempt for American technological solutions ran deep in Japanese naval culture. When intelligence officers briefed fleet commanders about U.S. experiments with infrared detection equipment in mid-1943, the response ranged from skepticism to outright mockery. According to USSBS Report No. 75, Admiral Somu Toyota dismissed infrared technology as another American toy that will break when the seas get rough. Japanese doctrine emphasized human skill, warrior spirit, and training over mechanical solutions. One interrogated officer told American investigators that his superiors believed machines cannot replace the fighting spirit, and that American reliance on gadgetry revealed softness of character. The Japanese perspective wasn't entirely unfounded. Early American technological innovations often disappointed. Magnetic torpedo exploders failed catastrophically. Radar systems malfunctioned in tropical heat and humidity. Fire control computers gave erratic solutions. Japanese officers saw these failures as confirmation of their philosophy: human excellence trumped mechanical complexity. But while Japanese commanders trained their eyes and dismissed American technology, American engineers were solving the night fighting problem in a completely different way. They weren't trying to enhance human vision, they were making darkness irrelevant. The development of practical infrared night vision technology emerged from a U.S. Office of Scientific Research and Development crash program initiated in late 1942. Scientists at laboratories across America worked on a deceptively simple concept. If you illuminate a target with infrared light invisible to the human eye, and view that target through a device that converts infrared to visible light, you can see in total darkness while your enemy remains blind. The challenge wasn't theory, it was engineering devices robust enough for combat conditions, compact enough for ships and vehicles, and reliable enough to stake lives on. By mid-1943, prototypes began reaching the fleet. The technology went by various designations: snooperscope, sniperscope, different project codes that concealed their true purpose. The devices were bulky, temperamental, and required careful handling. Early versions had limited range and poor image quality. But they worked, and every month they got better. The first combat test came during a small-scale night engagement off New Georgia in August 1943. A U.S. destroyer equipped with an experimental infrared searchlight and viewing apparatus detected a Japanese supply convoy at a range where conventional visual spotting was impossible. The American commander, Lieutenant Commander John Wiltse, had been briefed on the equipment but remained skeptical. His radar operator had contact, but visual confirmation seemed impossible in the moonless murk. The infrared operator called out bearing and range. Wiltse looked through the viewing device and later described the experience as witchcraft. The Japanese ships appeared clear and sharp, silhouetted as if by invisible light. Every detail stood out: the vessels' profiles, their wakes, even individual crew members visible on deck. The Japanese ships continued on course, showing no awareness of being observed. Wiltse's destroyer opened fire, scoring multiple hits in the first salvo. The Japanese ships scattered in confusion, unable to locate their attacker. After-action reports noted that enemy vessels fired randomly, their searchlights sweeping empty ocean while the American destroyer maneuvered with perfect awareness of enemy positions. The engagement lasted 17 minutes. 2 Japanese transports went to the bottom. A destroyer suffered severe damage. American casualties, 0. Japanese forces never acquired a clear visual contact on their attacker. When decoded Japanese communications were analyzed weeks later, enemy commanders reported being ambushed by a large force, and praised their crews for fighting against overwhelming odds. They had faced a single destroyer that could see them while they remained blind. Word spread through the Pacific Fleet, though operational security kept details scarce. Commanders who had heard whispers of the technology requested it for their vessels. Admiral Raymond Spruance, according to naval records, personally inquired about the night vision apparatus after reading engagement reports. But production remained limited, devices were still being refined, and the Navy wanted more combat data before committing to large-scale deployment. The Japanese noticed something had changed, but their intelligence apparatus failed to grasp the scale of the shift. Interrogation transcripts reveal that Japanese naval officers attributed increasing American night fighting effectiveness to improved training and better radar integration. Some speculated that the U.S. had recruited personnel with naturally superior night vision. The possibility that Americans had technologically eliminated the darkness itself never seriously entered Japanese tactical calculations. A Japanese destroyer captain named Kiyoshi Tanaka survived an engagement off Kalimbangara in October 1943 that should have followed the familiar script. His vessel, part of a Tokyo Express supply run, enjoyed every traditional advantage: experienced crew, superior night optics, the element of tactical surprise. American ships shouldn't have detected his approach until too late. Instead, American destroyers opened accurate fire from a range where visual acquisition was impossible. Tanaka maneuvered aggressively, but the American guns tracked his every move. He later told interrogators he felt like fighting an enemy who could see through walls. His destroyer limped back to Rabaul with 37 dead and the sick certainty that something fundamental had changed. But Japanese naval command still didn't understand. Senior officers reviewed action reports and concluded that American radar had improved. A technological edge, yes, but one that could be countered through aggressive maneuver, careful timing, and the warrior spirit that had always distinguished the Imperial Japanese Navy. Admiral Takeo Kurita, when briefed on the Kalimbangara engagement, reportedly said that technology cannot replace courage, and ordered his commanders to press night attacks with even greater audacity. By early 1944, more American vessels carried infrared equipment. The technology improved with each iteration: better range, clearer images, more reliable operation. Operators gained experience, developing techniques for maximizing effectiveness. Tactical doctrine evolved around the capability. American commanders began actively seeking night engagements, reversing years of avoiding combat after dark. The psychological shift was as important as the technological one. U.S. forces now owned the night. The Battle of Empress Augusta Bay on November 2, 1943, marked the moment Japanese confidence shattered against American technological reality. Admiral Sentaro Omori led a powerful force to attack American positions at Torikina. 4 cruisers and 6 destroyers against what he believed would be an inferior American force struggling in darkness. Omori had planned the attack specifically as a night action. His force would arrive after midnight, catch the Americans blind and confused, and destroy them before dawn. Every element of Japanese night fighting doctrine would be on display. Rear Admiral Aaron Stanton Merrill commanded the American force, 4 light cruisers and 8 destroyers. Several of his vessels carried infrared equipment. Merrill had studied Japanese night fighting tactics, understood their doctrine, and knew his enemy expected to dominate the darkness. He also knew something Omori didn't: the rules had changed. The forces made contact at 0127 hours. Japanese lookouts reported American ships at approximately 20,000 yards, respectable detection range by night fighting standards. What those lookouts didn't know was that American infrared operators had identified the Japanese force 3 minutes earlier at 23,000 yards and tracked their approach with perfect clarity, while Japanese commanders believed they still held the element of surprise. Omori's force moved to execute their battle plan: aggressive maneuver, rapid torpedo attacks, concentrated gunfire on whatever targets they could visually acquire. The American response shocked them. U.S. ships maneuvered with perfect awareness of Japanese positions, avoiding torpedo spreads that should have been invisible, concentrating fire with accuracy that should have been impossible in the darkness. Japanese searchlights swept the sea, trying to illuminate targets. The beams gave away Japanese positions without revealing anything American gunners didn't already know. The light cruiser Sendai, leading Omori's formation, took a devastating salvo within minutes of opening fire. Shells struck her bridge, engine rooms, and forward turrets. She listed hard to port, fire spreading rapidly. Commander Tashitane Ueno, who survived the sinking, later described the battle as fighting an invisible enemy. Japanese guns fired at muzzle flashes and estimated positions. American guns fired at clearly visible targets. Heavy cruiser Higuro took multiple hits. Cruiser Myoko suffered severe damage to her bow. Destroyer Hatsuke's, attempting to launch torpedoes, found herself under accurate fire from American destroyers that should have been struggling to locate her in the darkness. The Japanese ships that survived were those that retreated immediately, vanishing into the vast ocean before American forces could complete their destruction. Omori withdrew after less than 30 minutes of engagement, his force mauled and his confidence in Japanese night fighting superiority destroyed. He had done everything correctly by doctrine, approached at night, maneuvered aggressively, executed the tactics that had won at Savo Island. Nothing worked. The Americans fought as if daylight illuminated every Japanese vessel while his own forces groped through impenetrable darkness. U.S. forces suffered damage but maintained combat effectiveness throughout. The Japanese lost Sendai and destroyer Hatsuke's, with severe damage to multiple other vessels. But the strategic defeat went deeper than ships sunk. Japanese naval officers who survived realized something profound had shifted. An advantage they had spent decades cultivating and considered nearly insurmountable had vanished overnight. The full devastation of Japan's night fighting doctrine collapse became undeniable during subsequent engagements in late 1943 and early 1944. Japanese commanders who had once eagerly sought night battles now avoided them when possible. Those forced to fight after dark discovered that every assumption underlying their tactical doctrine had become not just wrong but lethally wrong. The Battle of Cape St. George on November 25, 1943, demonstrated the new reality with brutal clarity. Captain Kyoto Kagawa led 5 destroyers on a supply run to Buka, following the Tokyo Express pattern that had sustained Japanese forces for over a year. American intelligence knew he was coming. Captain Arleigh Burke, commanding Destroyer Squadron 23, positioned his 5 destroyers to intercept. 3 of Burke's vessels carried infrared equipment. Kagawa's force ran directly into the ambush. American destroyers detected the Japanese ships while remaining undetected themselves, the infrared equipment providing perfect situational awareness. Burke's destroyers launched torpedoes at targets clearly visible through their viewing devices while Japanese lookouts still strained to spot anything in the darkness. 3 Japanese destroyers, Onami, Makinami, and Yujiri, took torpedo hits before their crews understood they were under attack. The engagement lasted less than 40 minutes. 3 Japanese destroyers went down. The 2 survivors fled at maximum speed, their commanders abandoning any attempt at counterattack. American forces suffered 0 casualties and minimal damage. Kagawa died aboard Onami, following a tactical doctrine that no longer matched reality. But the technological shift went beyond infrared. American forces integrated multiple advantages: improved radar, better fire control systems, enhanced communications, and yes, the ability to see in absolute darkness. Japanese naval forces, optimized for human excellence in night fighting, found themselves outmatched across every dimension of modern naval warfare. The psychological impact on Japanese commanders ran deep. Officers interrogated after the war spoke of a profound loss of confidence. Captain Tamichi Hara, who survived multiple night engagements, later wrote that by early 1944, we knew the Americans could see us when we could not see them, and this knowledge was like a knife in the heart of our fleet. Japanese night fighting doctrine hadn't just been defeated, it had been rendered obsolete by an enemy they had mocked as technologically dependent and soft. Japanese Naval Command attempted countermeasures. Intelligence officers intensified efforts to understand American night fighting capabilities. Some units adopted more cautious night tactics, reducing aggressive maneuvers in favor of defensive positioning. Others doubled down on traditional doctrine, insisting that warrior spirit could overcome technological advantage. Neither approach changed the fundamental calculus. In darkness, American forces could see and Japanese forces could not. The final humiliation came during the Battle of Philippine Sea in June 1944. While the main engagement occurred during daylight hours, associated night actions demonstrated the complete reversal of night fighting supremacy. Japanese aircraft attempting night attacks on the American fleet found themselves illuminated by infrared searchlights and targeted by anti-aircraft guns guided by operators who could see attacking planes clearly. Pilots who survived described it as flying into a trap where the enemy sees everything and we see nothing. Admiral Somu Toyota, in his post-war interrogation documented in USSBS Report No. 75, admitted that by mid-1944, we had lost the night. He elaborated that Japanese naval forces had structured years of tactical doctrine around night fighting superiority, and losing that advantage was like losing an arm. The Imperial Japanese Navy had trained for decades to own the darkness. American technology had taken it away in less than 2 years. The infrared technology that shattered Japanese night fighting confidence continued evolving throughout the war. By 1945, thousands of devices equipped ships, aircraft, and ground forces across the Pacific. What began as an experimental prototype had become standard equipment, reshaping tactical doctrine across multiple domains. The naval war in the Pacific turned decisively against Japan for many reasons. American industrial capacity, carrier aviation dominance, submarine warfare effectiveness, and code-breaking intelligence all played crucial roles. But the loss of night fighting superiority eliminated one of the few remaining areas where Japanese forces held a genuine qualitative edge. American vessels that once avoided night combat actively sought it, confident in their technological advantage. Japanese forces adapted where possible. Some units improved their radar capabilities, though Japanese radar technology never matched American or British systems. Others emphasized daytime operations when visual parity existed. But these adaptations came too late and proved insufficient. The strategic initiative had shifted permanently to Allied forces, and Japan lacked the industrial capacity to develop countermeasures while simultaneously replacing catastrophic losses in carriers, aircraft, and experienced personnel. The human cost of technological obsolescence was staggering. Japanese sailors who had trained for years in night fighting techniques found their expertise worthless. Ships designed around night combat doctrines became death traps when enemy forces could see them perfectly while they remained blind. The psychological toll of fighting an enemy who possessed seemingly supernatural awareness devastated morale across the fleet. Post-war interrogations revealed the depth of Japanese misunderstanding. Officers expressed genuine shock at the extent of American technological capabilities. Many had assumed reports of infrared equipment were exaggerated or propaganda. Confronting the reality that American forces had achieved genuine night vision, not enhanced human vision but technological sight in absolute darkness, forced a fundamental reassessment of their entire understanding of modern warfare. The USSBS summary report noted that Japanese military culture's emphasis on spiritual and human factors over technological solutions contributed to their downfall. While Japanese forces trained their eyes and refined human night vision to biological limits, American engineers had made darkness itself irrelevant. The warrior spirit that Japanese commanders valued so highly couldn't compensate for being blind while the enemy possessed perfect vision. The captured infrared devices Japanese forces eventually recovered told their own story. American equipment was rugged, reliable, and produced in quantities that reflected industrial might Japan couldn't match. Each device represented not just a technological achievement but the entire system supporting it. Research laboratories, manufacturing facilities, logistics networks, and tactical doctrine that integrated new capabilities rapidly and effectively. The laughter of Japanese officers who dismissed American infrared technology as gadgetry echoed through the depths of the Pacific, carried down with the ships they commanded and the sailors who trusted their judgment. They had confused cultural values with tactical reality, believing that human excellence and warrior spirit could overcome any technological advantage. The darkness that had protected them became their tomb, illuminated by invisible light they never saw and couldn't counter. The story extends beyond night vision devices to a larger truth about modern warfare. Technological advantage compounds across every dimension of combat, and cultural resistance to technological adaptation proves fatal. Japanese forces fought with extraordinary courage and skill, but courage and skill weren't enough when the fundamental parameters of combat had shifted. American forces weren't braver or more skilled, they could simply see while their enemies could not. And in warfare, sight is survival. The men who died in those night battles never knew what killed them. They fought ghosts, fired at muzzles flashes, and sank beneath waves wondering how the Americans had become invisible. In the end, the most devastating weapon wasn't the one that destroyed your ship but the one that rendered all your training, doctrine, and experience obsolete before the first shot was fired.